Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining us in this series of talks promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation. We do this every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And I'm so very happy to be here because I get to host this talk that is going to be given to us by Luiz Villaca, who will be leading this theme, Spirit's Influence in Our Thoughts. Can't wait until we get to hear that with him. But let's all give Luiz a very very warm welcome. And before he starts his presentation, Luiz, let me introduce you to those who do not know you yet. So, who's Luiz? Luiz Villaca is an electronics engineer with a MSc from Carnegie-Mellon University and a Manchester University MBA. He is a worker, a member, a contributor at Grupo Fraterno, a Spiritist center in Sao Paulo, Brazil. He also virtually participates in the studies at the SGNY, Spiritist Group of New York. He has given many presentations there, as well as for the U.S. Spiritist Federation and International Spiritist Council audiences. Luiz, regularly contributes to the CEI Spiritist Review, and he does that through his work to translate from Portuguese to English and vice versa. I would like to welcome all of you to, with your thoughts and your minds, to give Luiz a warm welcome, but also to take this opportunity to remember to please send your questions. Throughout this presentation, you can do that by using the chat window. We have combined that Luiz will reserve time to address your comments, your questions, your feedback before we finish after his conclusion of the presentations. And I want to say thank you so much, Luiz, and please go ahead and get started. I appreciate you being here with us.
Thank you, Marcia, for your kind words. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. Today, we're going to talk about the Spirit's influence in our thoughts. Actually, we're going to study together this subject. For you who are not used to my presentations, I usually try not to say things like I think. All my slides are referenced, and everything that's in italic is word for word what was printed in the book. In books in English, I use the English translations that you are used to. The codification, I use the International Council of Spiritism translations that I like best. Sometimes I remove part of the text with those 3 dots. And the underlines, they are for me, just so that I have, the cues when I'm talking about any subject. I have a secondary mission here, not only so that we can study together, but also to try to induce you to read more, to study more Spiritist work. So I try to bring different books, sometimes books that you are not used to, just to entice you to go there and dig deeper and learn more. So that's part of what we're going to do here today. I'm going to introduce you hopefully, to many books that you haven't used before. And the way we'll work today is we're going to pick up specific passages in different books about the subject you are studying. Passages that maybe, even if you read the book, you might not have noticed it. But when you put those together, the idea is for us to form a picture, an image, mental image of what we are trying to figure out how it works. So hopefully in the end, we'll have, built this mosaic together and we know more about the Spirit's influence in our thought. I start with the Spirit's book. In the introduction, Kardec tells us straight that spirits constantly act upon the mental world and even upon the physical world. They, the spirits, act upon matter and thought. And in question 459, he tells us that their influence on our thoughts and actions is greater than we suppose, for very frequently it's they who guide us. Emmanuel tells us that we are permanently assimilating mental currents. Imperceptibly, we ingest thoughts at every moment, projecting around our individuality the forces we harbor within ourselves. If we devote ourselves to socializing with hardworking and dynamic people, we find valuable support for our work and achievement. Identical principles, he tells us, govern our relationships with each other, incarnate and discarnate. So we are constantly ingesting thoughts from incarnates and discarnates. Roteiro is a work by Emmanuel published 1952, and in the introduction, I like to cite introductions so that we have an idea what it is all about, right? People skip introductions, but they are important. Emmanuel, somewhere there, he tells us that beyond the grave, there are also the wise and the ignorant, the just and the unjust, hearts in heaven and consciences in purgatory or hell, actually, being word forward. So those are the mental currents around us. And he goes on and tells us that these unpretentious pages are an appeal for us to gather our strength around Christ, our Master and Lord. So go read Roteiro. You'll find it interesting. Jumping to Joana de Angelis, I know that Marcia studies a lot of Joana de Angelis. This is a book called Celeiro de Bênçãos from 1973. I wonder if she has read it. Anyway, Joana tells us that she wrote those pages that make up this book thinking of incarnate companions, us, who are facing difficult and complex situations. And what does she tells us about association? She tells, yes, those spirits who struggle with affliction in the afterlife, they produce disturbances, and in their agony, they spread restlessness. We are not referring here to the obsessive problematic as such. The fact is that each person, by placing their heart where their interests lie, when concentrating, tunes into identical minds, which respond to our appeals with equivalent expressions or identical acts. What Joana adds here is that we, when concentrating, we tune and we allow that influence to reach us. So we are the tuning elements, and we must be careful not to tune with the wrong elements. This is an interesting book. João Korngold. Oh, by the way, hi Jussara, hi Adriana. João Korngold, I believe, likes this book as well. Probably I like it more than he. I think it's a very important book. It's written by the spirit Camilo Cândido Botelho, who actually, this is the pseudonym for Camilo Castelo Branco. Camilo Castelo Branco, who was born in 1825 and discarnated in 1890, was a great Portuguese poet and novelist who wrote dozens of works. The thing is, he had blindness late in his life, And with it came a deep sadness, a deathful wish that ended up in him committing suicide. Through Ivone Pereira, he wrote this book, and that is his memory, Memories of a Suicide. And actually, it's a book I like very much. You should try to read it. I don't know if it's available in English already, but it tells us a lot about the spiritual world. And in particular, those aspects relate to suicides that are not very clear many times. I found it very, very interesting. In the introduction, Ivone Pereira says that among the many spirits of suicides with whom I have had exchanges through my mediumistic faculties, one stood out for the assiduity and sympathy with which he always honored me, and especially for the glorious name he left in Portuguese language and literature. She also tells us in the introduction that she doesn't know why Camilo Castelo Branco chose her, because she was not very evolved at the time. She hadn't, because she was young, she hadn't studied much, she was not well prepared, she thought. But she's the one who transmitted his writings. And actually, it's interesting because those writings, she tells us, they stayed in a drawer for years because she didn't, feel that she was able to format and publish them. Eventually, she received instructions to proceed and that she would receive the necessary assistance. Anyway, in this passage, and I wanted to cite this work, Camilo Cândido Botelho is already in a colony. He is recovering, but he is back close to us here, discarnated, of course, for a number of preparatory work anyway. And he says in there, we stayed among the incarnated for about 2 months for meetings that we lacked and many others of initiatory preparation. As suicides, whose aura was tainted by inferior radiations, we could bring disturbance and disgust to the poor incarnate creatures we approached, or receive influences from them that were harmful to the delicate treatment we were undergoing. We felt inhibited about staying in any places inhabited or visited by incarnate souls. So what we can get from this, that even not wanting to influence us incarnates, if they were around us, they could influence us. So sometimes these influences are not willing, and they, recognizing their situation, they avoiding getting closer to us, not to, hurt, the word is not bother, not to bring disturbance. I'm going to use his word. Fantastic book. We go to Liberation now. Liberation is by André Luiz. I couldn't not mention André Luiz here. And this is the 60th book of the series Life in the Spiritual World by André Luiz. It's not an easy book. I know that we studied together in the SGNY, right, João? In this book, André Luiz goes on a relief service accompanying instructor Gubio, and they go to a huge purgatory colony, a veritable city inhabited by merciless phalanxes. This particular text is from chapter 1, there's a 5 there, it's wrong, is 1, where Minister Flaccus speaks to those who will go with Gubbio, and he tells them, generally speaking, incarnate spirits are surrounded by the somber and debasing radiations from imperfect and indecisive spirits like themselves, spirits that may be invisible to them but share their homes with them nonetheless. Just beyond the human kingdom, the immense empire of discarnate intelligences unceasingly takes part in humanity's judgment. The planet is nothing more than a huge labyrinth for spiritual growth. So we live in a huge labyrinth for spiritual growth, where we must find the correct paths to reach that growth. And, try to avoid bad associations and look for good associations. This
Sorry, I am muted. Just wanted to tell everyone that we are having issues with Luiz's internet connection, and just ask that we be a little bit patient until he comes back. There should be no problem. Love to understand. This is just my thoughts while we wait for him. That as he's speaking about this specific topic of spiritual influence, and he's relating to Andre Luiz, the book Liberation. Just want to note that it is an amazing book. If you have not read it, it is translated from Portuguese into English, and it just demonstrates the divine mercy. There he is. He comes back, Luiz. Thank you.
There seems to be an internet issue. I think it's countrywide because all my links, but here I go to the backup.
All right.
And hopefully it will come.
There it is. Let's just wait another second to see if it's normalized. And while it's normalized, let's just, as I was finishing the thought, it
change one more slide for me, Marcia.
Okay. There
yes.
we go.
That is Dante Alighieri, born in 1265, discarnated in 1321. We see a lot of pictures from Dante Alighieri. I'm going to switch cameras, okay, because it seems like the internet reestablished itself.
Good. I'm back in my primary camera. Anyway, Dante Alighieri, we have seen a lot of images from Dante Alighieri, but most of them were painted or sculpted out of his death mask. So this is one of the rare cases of an actual image made during his lifetime of Dante Alighieri. As you know, he was a writer, he had many other important functions, but he is recognized for the writing of the Divine Comedy. The Divine Comedy, as you know, is divided into 3 parts: hell, purgatory, and paradise. And in many ways, it shaped the vision that we have of hell. I am seeing Marcia there. I hope I am live and you're following me, because the YouTube is very, very late. Anyway, I'm going to believe and I'm going to go on. This is an fresco by Giotto di Bordone, made while Dante Alighieri was alive. It's the oldest portrait of Dante Alighieri that I could find in my research. And why I mentioned Dante Alighieri? We go back to the Spirits book. Question 462. Kardec asks, do individuals of intelligence and genius always draw their ideas from within themselves? And the answer from the spirits are, their ideas sometimes arise from their own spirit, but frequently they are suggested to them by other spirits who deem them capable of understanding them and worthy of transmitting them. When they cannot find ideas within themselves, they appeal for inspiration. They are making an evocation without even suspecting it. So, would Dante Alighieri's vision of hell, purgatory, and paradise be an inspiration transmitted to him by an errant spirit? It's possible, isn't it? In the Spirit's book, in question 471, talks to us about communications during sleep. When we experience a sensation of anguish, of indefinable anxiety, or inner satisfaction without a known cause, it's almost always the effect of communications you have with spirits without even suspecting it. So, those sensations that we don't know how they come, they are almost always the effect of communications. And he adds, or those you have had with them during sleep. So we do have communications during sleep. And for this, I will go to the Missionaries of Light. Missionaries of Light is the third book in the Life of the Spiritual, in the Spiritual World collection. In this book, André Luiz accompanies the work of Alexandre with incarnates. I'm sure you remember this book because in the second part, there is the reincarnation of Sigismund that people always remember. But in the first part, there's something that is related to what we are discussing. They were in a room in the spiritual world, and Francisco, who is there with André Luiz and Alexandre, asks Alexandre, I would like to bring along some collaborators who frequently work with us. We would be very happy to see them take advantage of their time of physical sleep. He's talking about incarnate collaborators. Huh? Certainly, tonight's work is meant to prepare the still incarnate co-workers. Alexandre says that our core of incarnated students has become quite large. However, they are lacking in certain qualities essential for functioning at their full potential. So Alexandre here is doing a work of communicating, educating incarnate students while they are asleep. Whoops, kind of slow to change the slides. Someone asks, I think it's André Luiz, do the brothers and sisters who attend have total recall of the work and study they have shared in and the remarks they've heard? The eternal person, Alexandre explains, has total recall and will inwardly retain all teachings, intensifying and valuing them according to his or her own evolutionary state. The physical human being cannot go so far. Meaning the eternal person has total recall, but we, while reincarnated, we don't. But he explains the benefits remain in the memory of everyone of goodwill, even if during their waking state they are unsure about their origin. When students wake up after attending these classes, they experience relief, rest, and hope, as well as the acquisition of new educational values. It is true that they cannot recall the details, but they have retained the essence, feeling reinvigorated in a way they cannot explain, not only enabling them to recommence their daily struggle in the physical body, but also to benefit their neighbor and to successfully combat their own imperfections. The point being that we might be it's strange. I think, Marcia, you're using your slides, not mine. Anyway, go back. The point here, being that we might be going nightly to classes. Who knows? Maybe when we wake up feeling good, we have been there. Again, who knows? This night, I had so many dreams, so many interesting dreams. They were so coherent. I don't remember being in a classroom, but I remember studying a lot, doing a lot, analyzing things. What might have happened? And how about their influence on events? Do spirits exert any influence on the events of life? Certainly, because they counsel you. This comes from questions 525 and 534. When obstacles seem to factually inflict our projects, it's because of the influence of some spirit. It is, replied the spirits, sometimes because of the influence of a spirit. Other times, and more frequently, it's because you yourselves have mismanaged our projects. So the point being, we cannot blame the projects that derail on spirits. Other times, more frequently, they tell us, is we that did not do it correctly. But the spirits may present obstacles to our projects, and this is the point we are getting from here. Question 537 is very, very interesting. Kardec asks, because he's trying to figure out how the spirits exert influence on events. And he asks, suppose a man seeks refuge under a tree. Lightning strikes the tree, and the man dies. Did spirits cause the lightning and direct it at him? The reply is that the lightning struck the tree at that particular moment because the event happened according to the laws of nature. The lightning was not directed at the tree because the man was under it. He was under it because he was given the inspiration to take refuge under the tree where the lightning would strike. The tree would have been struck anyway, whether the man had been under it or not. Point being that the key way that the discarnate spirits influence us is by inspiring us to do this or that in this or that moment. It could be something for good, could be something for not that great. But it's by inspiration, not by distorting the laws of nature so that something odd happens. And an illustration of this that I find very neat is, where's my mouse? In O Semeador de Estrelas. This is a very, very interesting book. It's a book written by Sueli Caldas Schubert. Sueli Caldas Schubert was here with us recently. She just donated, I believe, last year. João Cornigold had opportunity to participate in study groups with her. Unfortunately, I didn't. I would like to have had a chance to meet her. Anyway, this book is about Divaldo. And it was published in 1989. Divaldo is the Semeador de Estrelas. I don't know how to translate that to English. The seeder of stars probably would be a very close translation. And she tells us that 40 years ago, the almost boyish Divaldo publicly began his earthly mission. I think he was probably 18 or 19. A little of his experience is in this book, which we have written with the deepest happiness, based on his testimonies recorded by us. So she recorded interviews with Divaldo Franco. Interviews that, she reproduces in the book. And in each chapter she comments those stories that Divaldo told her and analyzes them. Very interesting book. I don't know if it's available in English. I couldn't find it, but it's worth a reading. And in chapter 16, Divaldo tells a story that's very resumed here, abstracted here. He tells that he used to take the train from Catanduva to Sao Paulo because he started to give speeches in Catanduva. He was going to take the train. He noticed a girl like about 18 was with her mother waiting to enter the train. He got on the train quietly and the girl alone got on the train too. Then a young man came in, one of those womanizer types. He approached her, he examined her carefully, went to sit next to her, and, things seemed to start to evolve. I removed part of the thrust. And Divaldo says, watching the scene, I prayed, fearing what would come next. And he thought, my God, don't let her be seduced, I prayed. Suddenly, a spirit came in. Divaldo saw the spirit, dressed in old Spanish style, like a civilian, flamenco coating, with a high comb in her hair like the photo, lace mantilla, a long, very beautiful dress. She was a venerable entity, he tells us. She looked at me and the couple and said, "Your prayer has been heard," she said to me. She turned to the two of us and began to apply passes to the girl. She finished, saluted me, and disappeared. Suddenly, the girl choked and vomited on the womanizer guy, hitting him from top to bottom. He was wearing a light, clear suit. It must have been a mess. The man jumped up and shouted, "You rat, look at what you've done." And he went off in a rage, trying to clean himself up. The girl, very embarrassed, turned to me and explained, "Look, I never get sick." And it goes on, and Divaldo helps her, and nothing bad happens. Later in the chapter, this is the comment by Sueli Caldas Schubert. The help technique adopted by the venerable entity is worth mentioning. Definitely. She interfered on the event, making the girl vomit, and with this, remove a danger from her path. And she continues, Sueli Caldas, because the incarnated do not detect the activities of the spirituality in the events of everyday life, one often rebels against certain events that usually happens for his own benefit. How many impediments and obstacles, how many surprises and unpleasant situations, small or not, appear on the path of the creature precisely to prevent them from making certain mistakes, from going to certain places that would be harmful to them, from acting unthinkingly. So we have an insight here, not only on the techniques that the spirits use to influence events, but also an opportunity to, do some inner search and think that maybe things that happened to us were to help us, even if they were unpleasant at the time. And in the future, when, things we don't feel very happy about happen to us, maybe they were put there, or we were induced to have them happen, to help us, not to annoy us, but to help us. Good insight, isn't it? But now we move to the influence of less developed spirits. Not like what we just read in the story by Divaldo, but spirits that do not want our good, do not want to help us. Alerta is a book by Joana de Angelis. According to her in the preface, they are just simple and quick thoughts for emergency problems and difficult procedures. She tells us that, believe it or not, spiritual exchange happens naturally within the laws of affinity that govern life. Whatever people place their thoughts and moral values, there the mechanisms of tuning occur, enabling spiritual interchange. It reinforces things we have already studied today. And she continues, those who leave Earth strongly imbued with vices come back eager, thirsty, anxious, trying to continue the unfortunate program, now interrupted, using like-minded apprentices who give them their physical organs. As a result, the caravan of helpless victims suffering from crude spiritual obsessions is very large. She essentially saying that many here incarnated, they are being directed by spirits less developed that come back trying to continue whatever they do through those incarnates. It's something we see often in the disobsession works in our work in the institutes we usually go. Anyway, question 530. Kardec asks, do spirits who cause annoyances, those less developed spirits, behave in such a manner as a result of personal animosity, or do they attack the first person who they meet out of simple malice and without any set motive? He was told that they act from both motives. Sometimes they are enemies whom you have made in this life or in the previous one, and whom you pursue as a result. At other times, there's no motive. So there might be something associated with us, or just someone that got close to her by accident. Similar thoughts. I come back to the missionaries of light. In chapter 5, a little earlier, from the text we discussed, that was chapter 8 before, they were in a Spiritist center, Alexandre, André, and after the work, or after it ended, people, the incarnated, start to get out this way, the other way, and a young man accompanied by an elderly lady and a young woman were on his way home. They were actually a young man, his mother, and his sisters. Three spirits of gloomy appearance, completely blind to our presence, due to the low vibratory level of their perceptions, approached the trio. One of the spirits leaned on the elderly lady, and instantaneously I noticed that her forehead became opaque, strangely dark. Her radiant joy disappeared and gave way to the signs of deep worry. She had become completely transfigured. An example of the almost instantaneous influence of a less developed spirit to someone who was, a few moments ago was doing spiritist work. Actually, she comments, I don't know what happens. I leave the work so happy, and a few moments later, a gloominess comes about. It's the influence of this particular spirit. Alexandre put his right hand on the girl, the sister, keeping it under a vigorous magnetic influx while transmitting benevolent thoughts to her. I noticed that when he touched the young woman's curly hair, his protective hand let off luminous sparks, which only I could perceive. The young woman seemed to become more poised and dignified in her almost childlike expression. It's the same thing, but for goodness here. Alexandre exerted a positive influence on the girl, and the girl felt better. She argued with sense in the conversation they were having. So both kinds of influence can happen. Alexandre explained to André Luiz, the spirit attached to our sister, to the mother, used to be her husband, a man who did not develop his spiritual potential and who lived in tremendous selfishness at home. It was her husband from present life. She was a widow. So in this case, it was a person that she knew before and that had a reason to be there annoying her. And he continues, the two unhappy spirits clinging so hard to the young man are two institution. So this, a little internet flick, but we go on. This is the other case. The case where, the two spirits had nothing to do before with the boy, but, he was in a prostitution house and those guys got to him and they followed him. And then Luiz asked, but isn't there any way to free them? Alexander replies, whoops, I think I was too long. Sorry about that. Sorry about the slides. They never lacked the outside help of our continuous friendship. So they were always being helped by them. However, they, the incarnated themselves, nourish each other, the discarnate spirits, in the realm of subtle sensations. And Andrea asks, but couldn't we make these unconscionable vampires leave? The parties would simply make them return, explained Alexandre. They would mutually fulfill each other in their continuous exchange of emotions and innermost feelings. The lesson here is that to break those chains with less developed spirits, there must be the want of the incarnated. We must be very, very careful not to enter in a relation such as that, where we nourish each other and we just keep those less developed spirits around us. And now I move to Broken Shackles. I'm not sure if this book by Emmanuel de Miranda has been translated to English. I know that João studied this book in Lent, and it's an interesting book. I'm not going to go further to that. It's a 1974 book where the introduction by Emmanuel de Miranda, he says that in dealing with obsessed people and in the face of obsessions, let us arm ourselves with the resources of love so that we may succeed in seeing the shackles broken and the spirits freed to commit themselves to happiness. Is exactly what we said before. And an interesting thing is, in this book, before each chapter, Manuel Filomeno has taken the concept of mentioning the questions that related to what he's going to say. In this case, the questions for 50 and for 65. And let's go to the text. Taken aback by the assistant's arguments, this is a doctor in a psychiatric institution that is discussing with an assistant. The administrative director sat down, disentangled himself from the mephitic fluids. Mephitic means toxic, means full. From the full fluids that obliterated his discernment and calmed down. So here we have a doctor who was sort of furious with the assistants. But then, came a light and he said, well, he disentangled himself from whatever, was getting to him. And Dr. Newton Silva was a judicious man. He was a good person. That morning, however, he had a quarrel at home, experienced singular annoyances, and those thoughts had made him falling victim to the siege of unhappy entities. We must be careful with that. That's what we learn from this particular little piece of text. We might do an annoyance that we have in some circumstance, have the wrong thoughts, and those thoughts would attract spirits, and we would sort of, connect it to it, and it would result probably in us behaving in a way that we would not like to behave later on. We do not want to do bad things. And we move now to Emmanuel again. The book Estude e Viva. I'm not sure if this book has been translated to English. He tells us that whenever we experience a state of mind that tends towards defeatism, and a state of mind that has left for several hours without a prominent organic or moral cause, that we should consider the possibility of a subtle spiritual influence. In this case, negative spiritual influence of less developed spirits. And we should be clear with ourselves in order to help our spiritual mentors to help us. This is a true opportunity for humility, prayer, and the path. No explanation required. He goes on in this way. Where's my mouse? I lost my mouse. No, it's here. He goes on to try to describe to us factors that can reveal this condition of us being so whoops, an internet glitch. Hopefully you didn't lose much. Anyway, those are points that Emmanuel asks us to be aware, and they could be, leads for us to perceive that we're being influenced by less developed spirits. If we feel difficulty concentrating ideas on optimistic motives, if we lack of an intimate atmosphere to raise feelings in prayer or to concentrate on edifying reading, if we feel an unexplained disposition, sadness for no apparent reason, if we feel forebodings of immediate disasters, if we feel annoyance of not being able to find fellow humans or subjects, dogs or cats, on whom or what to take it out on, if we feel surreptitious, pessimism, deaf irritation, complaints, exaggerated sensitivity, and an aptitude for condemning those who are not to blame, place the guilt on the other, those could be hints that we're being influenced. We should be aware of those. We should try to recognize this. And he continues. If we start to force interpretations of facts and attitudes which do not correspond to reality, if we feel hypermotivity or depression with the imminence of tears, if you feel an eagerness to play the victim or take an absurd position of self-martyrdom, if we are stubborn in not accepting for ourselves that there is a spiritual influence on us, but minutes or hours after the event, we change our impulses, we repent, we compose our mental tone, and not infrequently, realize that it's too late to undo the mistake that was made. That should not be a point, that should be text. I did the right slide wrong. Anyway, Emmanuel gave us hints on how to perceive that we're, being influenced. And what should we do? Later on this conversation or this study, we'll get instructions on things that we might do. And we go to Instruções Psicofônicas, psychophonic instructions. This is a neat book. Anyway, in this book, there's a communication by Menezes Dias da Cruz. Actually, at the beginning of this chapter, they say, on the evening of March the 3rd, 1955, we were delighted to hear the spiritual instructor Dias da Cruz once again. He continued his remarkable studies on obsession, and that's the subject we'll try to get information from the next slides. Who was Francisco? Francisco was the president of the Brazilian Spiritist Federation after Bezerra de Menezes from 1890 to 1895. He discarnated in 1937. It's interesting because he was sympathetic to Spiritism, but, did not really incorporate the doctrine. But he was told by someone that his father, who had passed away, was appearing in sessions in the Brazilian Spiritist Federation. He went there, and while he was there, in a mediumistic meeting, time passed and time passed. He was about to leave, and a medium had incorporated his father and called him by name and asked him to come closer to the table because his father wanted to speak to him. Surprised, he heard a fact that only they both knew. After that, he began to study Spiritism in that, and after studying and studying, he made his mind up and became a Spiritist worker, always concerned with helping others. This short explanations comes from the Spiritist Federation of Paraná. Anyway, what did he say? Obsession is the process used by discarnates of inferior condition, consciously or unconsciously, in the culture of vampirism. They juxtapose themselves to the aura of creatures who offer them passivity and sucking out their energies, lord it over their motor and sensory areas, including the brain centers, where the spirit keeps its conquests of language and sensitivity, memory and perception. They dominate them in the manner of an artist who controls the keys of a piano, thus creating ghost diseases of all kinds in the corporeal instrument of the obsessed, which, as they extend over time, cause the degeneration of organic tissues, establishing the empire of real illnesses that persist until death. So what he said that particular evening, March 3rd, 1955, was that in the process of obsession, sometimes the spirit created ghost diseases, and those ghost diseases in the incarnates ended up causing degeneration of the tissues and become real illnesses that persist until that. One more reason to avoid approaching that kind of connection. He continues, Francisco. Within this context of imaginary illnesses, with virtual possibilities of materialization and manifestation, we find all the symptoms cataloged in common pathogenics, from simple neurasthenia to complex madness, and from the usual gastric disorder to the very rare aphemia studied by Broca. What he's saying here is that almost all diseases could be a consequence of this kind of obsessing influence, from simple neurasthenia to madness, from gastric disorder to aphemia. Broca was a doctor who coined the neologism aphibia. It means an illness where someone cannot speak, although his speaking apparatus is okay. He understands language, he writes, but he cannot speak. This is the aphemia studied by Broca that he mentioned here. This is why, he continues, while respecting the medical help provided by the clinic and surgery in all circumstances, it is essential that we focus on the value of prayer and evangelical conversation as first-rate psychotherapical resources in the work of disobsession in our spirit activities. He's oriented the importance of that because he's talking to a group that works in disobsession. He continues, the prayer circle projects the impact of balsamic and constructive energies on the persecutors and the persecuted, who combine in the atoning ordeal. And the mediumistic incorporation carries out the transfer of depraved or suffering entities, dislodging them from the environment of the body of their victims. It fixes them in the short term in the physiopsychic organization of the mediums of goodwill for understanding and correcting points of view in favor of the recovery of the sick with a sensation of discord, imbalance, and suffering. He's describing what we do in the disobsessing works that we do in our spirit houses. I'm bad with that translation today. Anyway, let me tell a bit more about this book that's very, very interesting. In 1952, in Pedro Leopoldo, on Thursdays, they started doing disobsession work, instructed by the mentor of Chico Xavier, Emmanuel. They called themselves Grupo Meimei. Meimei was the first wife of Arnaldo Rocha, who had passed away in 1946. Meimei probably is Blandina, from Between Heaven and Earth. At the end of each disobsession session in a Thursday, they had for like 15 minutes the opportunity to hear from the mentors present, from the good spirit that supported that particular group. They felt, bad that they couldn't preserve those communications. Eventually, they got on loan a recorder. Can you imagine how difficult it would be to get a voice recording in 1952? Recorder, 1952. Anyway, they got one, and they recorded many of those communications. All were psychophonic communications through Chico Xavier. Would be so great to be there, wouldn't it? But you have a chance by reading this book of accessing those communications. Aren't you curious? Go do it. Back to Spirit's book. In question 474, 475, Kardec explored this. May a spirit nonetheless find itself dependent on another spirit so that it sees itself subjugated or obsessed by it to such a degree that its own will is in some way paralyzed? The answer is yes. And these, they tell him, are the truly possessed. You must understand, however, they say, that this kind of nomination never occurs without the participation of the one who suffers it, either through weakness or desire. In question 473, we learned that a spirit associates to an incarnate spirit who has its same defects and qualities, so that they can both act conjointly. Nevertheless, it's always the incarnate spirit who acts upon the matter enveloping it, and according to its own wish. The incarnate spirit has control. He willingly entered on those relations. And they tell us, a spirit cannot replace the one who is incarnate, because the spirit is connected to the body until the time set for the end of its material existence. This is just a confirmation of something we know. Another spirit cannot, replace us in this body. It's ours for as long as we are incarnated on it. We move to Voltaire. Voltaire is a fantastic book. It's being written by Frederico Figner. Frederico Figner was born in 1866 in the Czech Republic today, then Bohemia. And he went to Brazil, first to America, then to Brazil, and became a businessman. He was the guy who brought vitrolas, turntables. I think it's turntable is the correct expression. Anyway, he wanted to discarnate in a state of consciousness. He asked for this, and it was given to him. So in the book Voltaire, he describes his process of discarnation, of going to a spiritual colony, not actually spiritual colony, but a support center. Very, very interesting. It's the only book I know that describes this process of discarnation, because he didn't have the perturbation. He was conscious the whole time. And also the way he is supported by friends and by his daughter that had discarnated earlier. Go read this book. We are studying it actually now in our group in Brazil. Eventually, he came back to Rio de Janeiro, and that's what that picture shows in the comments that we're going to make. He observed that many creatures were accompanied by benign spirits, such as that one in the middle. Others were followed by true vampires in a disgusting way. He looked like a man subjugated by huge octopus tentacles, which affect the delicate tissues of the perisphere, providing sweet poisons to lovers of idleness. And he talks about the black threads. Anyway, I wanted to mention this book so that you would go and read it. And it shows the two kinds of approximations. The good ones that exert good influence, and the obsessive ones, such as in the pictures. And we get to, how can we break their negative influence? And question 469 is just that. By what means can we neutralize the influence of evil spirits? That's practical, that's interests us. By doing good and placing our trust in God. By doing that, we repel their influence and we destroy the power they desire to have over us. And they continue. We should guard ourselves against listening to suggestions of spirits who excite evil thoughts in our mind, those who incite discord and arise in us the evil passions. Above all, distrust spirits who flatter our pride, for they are attacking us at our weakest point. In 476, there's an interesting question. A third person can help breaking the negative influence someone is receiving. And let's say, if the individual, if this third person is morally upright, by appealing to the cooperation of good spirits, because the more the more a moral person is, the more power that person has regarding imperfect spirits in order to repel them, and regarding good ones in order to attract them. Nevertheless, this third person will be completely powerless if the one who is subjugated does not cooperate. After all, there are persons who take delight in a dependence that satisfies their tastes and desires. In all cases, however, those who do not have a pure heart cannot have any influence whatsoever. Good spirits ignore them, and evil ones do not fear them. This is self-explanatory, but it reminds us that we can try to help, but we are powerless if the one who is subjugated does not cooperate. In 478, 479, Kardec asks, there are persons with good intentions, but are obsessed nevertheless. What are the best means for them to free themselves from obsessing spirits? They say, tire their patience. Pay no attention to their suggestions and show them that they are wasting their time. Then, when they see they can do nothing, they will withdraw. Sort of optimistic. Prayer is a powerful aid in everything, but it's insufficient to simply mutter a few words to obtain what you desire. Therefore, obsessed persons must do their part in order to destroy in themselves the cause that attracts evil spirits. From Alerta that we have mentioned, Joana de Angelis tells us that we should free ourselves from inferior passions by working on our aspirations and shaping our future through correct action. We should change our vicious mental cliches and renew our inner landscapes. We should say the prayer of silence, reflecting on the real values of life. We should bind ourselves to the love of others, contributing in some way for the good of someone, to the general good. If we feel negative tendencies being stirred up, we should wake up and react, not letting ourselves be hypnotized by disturbing spirits. From Celeiro de Bênçãos, Joana de Angelis tells us, yes, those who have arrived in the spiritual world disturbed, defeated, unhappy in themselves, do disturb the ones on earth, us. Before they reach perfect tuning with our minds, we should lift ourselves up. How? Through moral austerity, by disciplining our thoughts and attitudes, so that we can rise above the dense and nefarious bands in which the spiritually disturbed are situated, our sick brothers and sisters from the evolutionary rear guard. And then we can help them safely. If we are momentarily or repeatedly subjected to any negative injunctions, we should remind ourselves of mental hygiene. How? Through prayer and meditation. And we should not favor unhappy daydreaming, thinking of bad things. From Studi Viva, what Emmanuel tells us, that we should, to break negative influence, we should begin by banishing from our brains all ideas of cruelty, violence, pessimism, and bitterness. In front of anyone, we should feel that we are facing a sister creature who is waiting for love from us. When resting or working at home or on the street, we should strive for harmony and serenity. In conversation, we should avoid images of irritation or malice. We should avoid repeating comments about scandals and crimes. We should always communicate joy and confidence to those around us. We should have the courage to do the good that we preach, diligently seeking the opportunity to serve. So, let us do the good that we preach and that we diligently seek opportunities to serve. Thank you so much. I used 1 hour and 15 minutes. I was well behaved.
That is amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much for your really amazing and so much depth in all the references for other works that is available in Portuguese in some cases, but in majority of cases also in English. So thank you so much. But before we go to our Q&A, we have a few minutes. I want us to give us some announcements. As you see in the screen, we have a new virtual course. It's called Introduction to Mediumship. It is a free virtual course for beginners. And please note that the U.S. Spiritist Federation is really thrilled to invite everyone who's eager to explore this realm of spirit communications according to Spiritism. So please check out the new course at as you can see there, the registration in red and blue, https learn.spiritist.us, or just go ahead and scan the QR code right now. Second announcement is please save the date. We already have that established on September 21st of this year in Boston. We will have the 18th U.S. Spiritist Symposium, and the theme, I love it, Life Through the Lens of Immortality, Philosophy of Spiritism. Can't wait. Third announcement is about our podcast like series, Psychology and Spirituality, A Bridge to a Better Life, based on the works by Joanna De Angelis. We have a new episode every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, and it is available both on YouTube, several channels, but also on Spotify. And finally, our last announcement is this amazing app. It's called the Spiritist app Be My Hope. It is available for anyone on the App Store or Google Play. And this focus of this app is to offer uplifting content in a collection of videos, messages, audio materials. Download it now. It's available for all of us. I think you can see, before we go to the question and answer, there is that QR code. Um, in case you want to help the U.S. Spiritist Federation produce more publications or any other channels that is available for dissemination and promotion of Spiritism to everyone, scan the QR code on screen and give your donation. So let's now start. We have a few minutes to address the comments and questions from the audience. Let's go ahead. Mary D'Souza, hi Mary, says, what is the best way, Luis, to approach work through those sudden feelings of anxiousness that have no explanation?
I think, in short, is to follow the recommendations of Joana de Angelis and Emmanuel, is to control your thoughts, control your actions, do good, and try to attract help from the good spirits and to, push away the ones who give you those feelings of anxiousness that have no explanation. Those are subtle influences. That's what we discussed the whole talk.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to Yasko has a great question.
Yasko, how you doing? So Yasko tells us, go ahead, Luis.
I know that I'm misbehaving, but I do it.
Yasko asks, hi, Luis. I remember listening somewhere a spiritual obsessor declaring he didn't need to make any effort as the quote unquote victim was self-obsessing, self-sabotaging herself. How does that self-obsession work? Can you talk about it?
That's a great question. I've heard similar things in our mediumship meetings, where spirits would say to the medium that particular person they were obsessing, they were asking for it, they were weak, they were opening themselves, etc. I'm not sure if that is self-obsession, but I do think that there is something called self-obsession. And it happens when your matrices, meaning scars from former lives, actually do obsess you in an animistic way. So yes, it can happen. I don't know how it actually works, and I believe it's going to need a lot of help to get rid of it. But there are those who self-sabotage themselves, and we encounter many of those around in the mediumistic sessions. And I'm not sure if that is really self-obsession, but there is self-obsession.
And I would add here, Yasko and Luis, whenever you're reading the works of Joanna de Angelis, she talks a lot about it as guilt, right? Guilt can lead the way to that quote unquote self-obsession where we cannot free ourselves from what we've done in the past. So love to give a plug as well to Joanna de Angelis. So I think we are at end. Oh, we have another one. How to best understand the intercession of higher order spirits on our behalf, and how demonstrates a sense of divine compassion and mercy during those moments of pain.
I don't know how to answer that, but I wouldn't know how to best understand the intersection of high order spirits. But I'm gonna skip this one. I
don't skip that one. So for whoever put that in, I'll try to say that it's really
that feels like Jussara.
Yes, but it's really a question of affinity, right? So not only we talked about a lot about a vibration, what are thoughts, the things, but also that there is the concept of divine mercy, right? The divine compassion that when we're going through our pain, there will be intercession. We will be inspired by those spirits of light, even though we're in a very bad stage, right? I think Mary Sousa was talking about anxiousness and all this. There's also a positive influence. I don't know. Maybe this helps all of you. I think we're at time. So I wanted to say thank you. Thank you, Luis. Thank you, everyone, whoever has spent your time with us this morning, if you speak about Eastern time. And for those who are also following us on our weekly Spiritist Talks series. Next Saturday, as you can see on the screen, May 4th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Don't miss our next live. Livia Wihara will be discussing willpower, self discipline, and character reformation. Awesome. But Louise, before we close the live, would you be so kind to close with words from a prayer perspective? I would appreciate that.
Sure. So let's thank our mentors for allowing us to be here together, studying, learning, finding ways to improve how we behave, finding ways for us to avoid the influences of lesser spirits. We should ask for their help so that we can incorporate the things that we read about and learned today and actually apply them in our daily lives. Let's ask, and I always do that, and thank the incarnates that run our spirit houses, that allow us to do the work and to help others and to learn ourselves. Let's thank all those fantastic spirits that share their thoughts and allowed us to learn more about the spiritual world. So thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, André Luiz. Thank you, Filomeno de Miranda. Thank you, Castelo Branco. Thank you, Joana de Angelis. You don't know how important it is that you do this and continue doing this. Thank you, all of the discarnate spirits that watched this presentation. I hope this was helpful to you. Those around me, those around you now, or when you are seeing this after, not live, they will be around you watching as well. Thank you to watch. And thank you, all incarnates that watch this presentation. Thank you, João, Márcia, Daniel, Yasko, Adriana, and others.
That is awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.